So let's now talk about your family and delinquency. So most often than not, they would tell you that delinquency is a throwback to your family. So whatever behavior a child has, lagi daw siyang throwback sa family. So let's now try to study what is the relation of family and delinquency. In order for us to understand the connection of family with delinquency, you need to first know what makes a good home. Always remember na meron tayong two important requirements. You have their parental discipline and parental attachment. When you say parental discipline, it actually refers to a manner or maybe a method used to prevent future behavioral problems in children which do not destroy the morality and individuality of the child. I repeat, this refers to methods used to prevent future behavioral problems in children without destroying their morality and individuality. Ibig sabihin, we can only consider it as parental discipline if the manner is positive. Ibig sabihin, your method should not destroy the individuality and morality of the child. Yes, you are trying to make him a law-abiding citizen, but you need to make sure that as you do that, you would not destroy his morality and individuality. This is the very reason why, if a parent now would be inflicting severe physical pain to the child, hindi na siya parental discipline. That is already considered as abuse, whatever your reason is. Okay? Positive dapat siya lagi. On the other hand, pag sinabi naman nating parental attachment, this would now refer to your closeness to your family. Or this would now refer to a child's bond or closeness to his family. Okay? That is parental attachment. Ang presumption kasi natin, guys, if parental attachment is high, tendencies of juvenile delinquency is low. I repeat, what's the presumption? If parental attachment is high, juvenile delinquency would be low. So, pag close ang bata sa family niya, ang chances ng juvenile delinquency would be low. Okay? Pag okay daw ang relation ng bata sa family niya, most probably this person would turn out okay. He would not commit any delinquency. Very rare daw na magko-commit siya ng delinquency. Okay? So what makes a good home? You have their parental discipline and parental attachment. Sabi natin, all homes are considered as families but not all families are considered as homes kasi not all families would be sharing love and affection. So, based on that, meron tayong tinatawag na pathogenic family. When you say pathogenic family, in layman's term, ito yung tinatawag nyo na broken family. Ma'am, what do you mean by pathogenic or broken family? It talks about a problematic family or a family clouded by problems. Ito yung family na dysfunctional dahil marami siyang problem. Now, not just because I use the term broken that you would automatically think na hiwalay na yung members. That's wrong. Okay? That's a wrong notion. Basang isipin nyo, pathogenic or broken family is a problematic family. So, ang question, what would be their problem? It depends kung anong type ng pathogenic family. Pwede kasing inadequate, pwedeng discordant, pwedeng antisocial, pwedeng disrupted. When you say inadequate family, it is a family that lacks resources. Thus, the family cannot provide the basic needs of the family members. I repeat. When you say inadequate family, it is a family that lacks resources. Thus, the family cannot provide the basic needs of the family members. Kaya siya inadequate eh. Okay? Bakit inadequate? Kasi may kulang. Ano ang kulang? Kulang sila sa mga resources. Because they lack resources, they cannot really provide the basic needs of the members. Dito papasok yung mga poor families. Dito papasok yung mga family na, oo, kumakain sila, pero hindi sapat yung kinakain nila. Okay? O di naman kaya may bahay sila, pero the house is not enough to protect them from the dangers of the weather or maybe the environment. Mga ganun cases yan. Number 2, you have what you call a discordant or disturbed family. When you say discordant or disturbed family, it is a family whereby the parents now or the members are no longer happy with the relationship. I repeat, it is a family whereby the parents or the family members are no longer happy with the relationship. Okay? Kaya siya discordant, kaya siya disturbed. Kasi there is already unhappiness in the relationship. Anong perfect example natin dito? Yung mga family whereby, kunyari, si father, hindi niya na love si mother. O di naman kaya, they fell out of love. O di naman kaya, nagkasawaan na sila. Or maybe, yung mga tinatawag nating product ng shotgun marriages, yung mga pinilit lang magpakasal, o di naman kaya yung mga cases of fixed marriages. Yung bata pa lang daw sila, tinadhana na sila, yung mga ganun. So, because of those setups, hindi na sila masaya doon sa arrangement doon sa family. Now, ang problem natin with the discordant or disturbed family, ang nakakaramdam nung problem, ang primarily affected nung problem would be the child. Ang problem, because he's a child, ang iisipin niya, it's his fault. Although alam naman natin hindi. Pero yun kasi ang setup ng mentality ng mga bata. So always remember discordant and happiness in the relationship. Next, you now have your antisocial family. Ang iisipin nyo lang dito, it is a family that exhibits immorality or teaches their family members wrongdoings. I repeat, it is a family that exhibits immorality, or maybe it is a family that teaches their members wrongdoings. Yun yung antisocial family. Kaya siya antisocial eh. What you teach your family members is considered as wrong. Ang ine-exhibit ng family ninyo, mali or maybe immoral. For your antisocial family, dito papasok yung mga families whereby the members teach the other members to do wrong things, or maybe they teach the other members to commit crimes. Perfect example, balikan ninyo yung mga family of criminals ninyo. 'Di ba? Yung Jukes family nyo, yung Zero family ninyo. Sino ang nagtuturo na gumawa ng crime? Yung family members mismo. Okay? Or maybe, ikaw tatay ka, tapos noon, tinuturuan mo yung anak mo na gumamit ng vices, o di naman kaya, ibubugaw mo yung anak mo, ganun, antisocial. Next, you have their disrupted. Diba? From the term disrupted, nasira. Ang isipin lang ninyo dito, a disrupted family is a family suffering from physical absence. I repeat, it is a family suffering from physical absence. Sa disrupted, ibig sabihin incomplete sila. So it's either merong family member na namatay, or maybe yung family member iniwan na sila, yung family member nasa abroad, basta may physical absence. If the physical absence now would be producing problems to the other members, ano siya? It is a disrupted family. So, para maintindihan nyo siya, or better, para madali nyo siyang maalala, pag inadequate, lacks resources. Pag discordant, unhappiness in the relationship. Pag antisocial, immorality. Tapos pag disrupted, incompleteness. Okay? So, ganun lang siya. These are your pathogenic family or yung tinatawag nating broken family. Now, pag-usapan natin yung models of family home. Ito, Class A siya sa board exam. Why say na Class A siya? Kasi, lagi siyang lumalabas. Okay? Pag may tanong sa juvenile, kadalasan, ang tanong dyan would be the models of a family home. So, ano ba yung models ng family home natin? Marami yan. Let's start with what you call your corporate model. Ang iisipin nyo, whenever we talk about your corporate model, corporate talks about a business. Okay? Laging ganun. Pag corporate model ay business-oriented to. When you say business-oriented, everything they do is for purposes of profit making. Ito yung type ng family na they are more of businesses, they want more profit, and at times, okay lang sa kanila na ipakasal yung mga anak nila sa isang tao for purposes of expanding the business. Okay, business-minded yung mga tao sa isang corporate model ng family niyo. Now, meron kasi tayong mga roles, di ba? Take note, ang family may father, may mother, tapos may children. Depende sa model kung ano yung role nila. In a corporate model, always remember that the father is the chief executive officer. When you say CEO, ang father, pag siya yung chief executive officer, the father's role is to give orders. Okay? So, anong gagawin niya? He would be making a plan. He would be the one giving orders. He has full authority over the family. That is your father. Kaya siya CEO. Planning, giving of orders, yung may authority, that would be the father. Now, whatever plan was executed by the father would be implemented by the mother. So, sino ang mag-i-implement? Si mother. So, because the mother would implement the plan executed by the father as CEO, yung mom ngayon ang tinatawag nyo na operating officer. Kasi ang operating officer, ano ang role niya? Implementation of the plans executed by the CEO. Okay? Now, syempre merong mga anak. The children now are considered as the personnel or maybe the staff. We use the term staff or maybe personnel or maybe employees. Now, dahil children ang staff, ano ang gagawin nila? They need to follow the plan executed by the father and implemented by the mother. Because it is a corporate model, you need to remember that the privileges and responsibilities of the children are always based on seniority. When you say seniority, it is based on age. Kaya nga, in a corporate model, sino ang may pinakamaraming responsibility? Yung panganay. Pero kahit na marami siyang responsibility, siya rin yung maraming privileges. I'm not saying at all times, ha? Pero most often than not, pag corporate model yan, ang panganay ang pinakaswerte. Why? Kasi privileges, responsibilities, nasa kanya yan. Why? Seniority. He is the oldest. Kaya siya ang nakakakuha ng mga yan. That is corporate model, ha? Take note, it is business-oriented. Characters, father is the CEO, mother is the operating officer, and the children would be the staff. Next, you have what you call your team model. Pag sinabi naman natin na team model, always remember that this family is competitive. Because they are competitive, everything is about winning. Everything is considered as a game. So, ang primary goal nila is to compete. If maaalala nyo, ito yung type ng family na they would usually compare their family or maybe their children with other children or maybe with other families. Ito nga yung mga family na pag nagsabi yung bata, ma, ganito po yung score ko sa exam. Mataas po siya. Tatanungin ng parents, paano si ganito? Ano ang highest niyo? Yung mga ganun. So, very competitive. Ano ngayon yung roles ni father, ni mother, tapos ni children? Always remember that the father is considered as the coach. So, because he is the coach, siya yung planner. Again, siya yung mag-iisip. Okay? Para rin lamang siyang corporate, yun nga lang, itong type ng model na to is more of winning. Yung mother, on the other hand, siya ngayon yung chief ng training table and head cheerleader. So, what's the role of the mother? She is the chief of the training table and the head cheerleader. Ibig sabihin, ang trabaho ngayon ng mother is to physically train the children and at the same time, emotionally and psychologically boost or maybe support the children. Okay? So, emotional at physical, sino in charge? Si mother. Why? Siya yung chief ng training table, tapos siya rin yung head cheerleader. Okay? That's your mother. So, anong role ng children? The children's role now would be players. So, who would be the athlete? Who would be the player? That would be the children. So, itong mga children na to, they would be suffering frequent performance anxiety, They would play by the rules provided by the father, and they need to assure that they are in shape in order for them to satisfy yung goal ng family nila, which is to win. Everything is a game, everything is about winning, everything is a competition. This team model always aspires to win. Very competitive. Team model. Next, you have your military model. Yung military model natin, ito yung very strict. Okay, nakakatakot siya. Why? Kasi everything here revolves on discipline. Take note, in a military model, ang format natin parang sa military. That's why you call it military model. It's very strict because it focuses on discipline. Now, ano ang role ni father? The father is the general. As general, anong binibigay niya? Order. And take note, if we use the term order, ibig sabihin, you can never say no to it. Kasi nga, it's an order. It is mandatory, it is compulsory, it is obligatory. You need to follow it. Ano ngayon ang role ni mother? Si mother yung guard on duty and at the same time, siya yung nurse. Medyo nakakalungkot kasi in a military model, ang mother dito, wala sa anak ang loyalty niya. But rather, the loyalty ando doon sa father. Kasi diba usually, yung ibang models natin, ang loyalty ng mother nasa anak. Ang kinakampihan yung mga anak. Pero in a military model, hindi ganun ang setup. The mother's loyalty is always with the father. Kaya nga, if the child would be doing something wrong, sumbong agad yan kay father ni mother. Okay? Dito, hindi mo maaasahan nakakampihan ka ni mother kasi ang expectation, ang loyalty niya na kay father. Why? Guard on duty. Okay? Aside from that, siya rin yung nurse. So, in terms of the health of the children, bahala rin doon si mother. Next, you now have the children. Of course, sino yung children nyo? Sila yung mga subordinates. Why call them subordinates? Because they are considered of a lower rank. Mas mababa daw sila. Ang iisipin nyo in this type of model, the rank justifies arbitrary behavior. So, anong basis ngayon ng rights and privileges? Hindi age, kasi nga hindi seniority, but rather it's the rank. Ibig sabihin, even if you are the youngest among the siblings, kung ikaw yung maraming nako-contribute or kung ikaw yung maraming na ibibigay doon sa family ninyo na prestige or maybe honor, ano ang sabi? Ikaw yung may pinakamataas na rank. So, hindi age ang basehan mo kasi it's not seniority. It's the rank. So, kung sino man ang merong na ibibigay na honor doon sa family, siya ang may pinakamataas na rank. Now, this type of model would always focus on discipline. Discipline is everything. Kaya nga, if a child disobeys, or maybe if a child becomes unruly, what would happen? He would be given punishment. Then in this type of model, punishment is considered as swift, bigayan kaagad, and sadism is called character building. So, kumbaga ba, it is okay for me to hurt you, it is okay for me to impose severe physical pain. Okay lang yan. Kasi take note, sadism is character building. That is your military model. Ito yung pinaka-strict, siya yung pinaka-hindi okay. Next, you have your boarding school model. Ang isipin nyo lang, pag boarding school model, para siyang school setup. Di ba ang boarding school ninyo, para yung dormitory? Imagine niyo yung setup ng Harry Potter. Okay? So, sa boarding school model, ang isipin nyo, everything is about learning. I repeat. In a boarding school model, everything is about learning. The father and the mother have nothing to learn. Therefore, they cannot be tested or they cannot be questioned. I repeat, in the boarding school model, everything is about learning. The father and the mother have nothing left to learn, therefore they cannot be questioned. Hindi mo pwedeng turuan ang nanay mo at tatay mo sa boarding school model. Why? Kasi, ang presumption, they already know everything. Now, yung father dito is the headmaster. The father is the headmaster. Kumbaga ba, parang siya yung principal. Anong ginagawa ni father? He would be the one in charge of training the strong minds and bodies of the children. Kasi nga, siya yung principal. On the other hand, si mother, sino siya? Siya yung dorm counselor. Siya yung guidance counselor, kumbaga ba. Kung yung father is mental and physical, yung mother naman is emotional. So, if the child would be having emotional problems, psychological disturbances, bahala si mother doon. Anong role ng children? Their role now would be dutiful students. So, ang kailangan lang gawin ng mga bata dito is to learn, learn, learn. Hindi nila pwedeng i-question ng parents nila kasi ang presumption, alam na ng parents lahat. That is your boarding school model. This type of family model is very common dun sa mga family ng mga teachers, ng mga professors, ng mga may doctorate, mga ganun, boarding school model. Okay, next. You have what you call your theatrical family. Please do remember that this is the most relaxed type of family. Ma'am, bakit siya most relaxed type? Kasi dito, you play your role the way you want to portray it. So, anumang role mo as father, as mother, as children, you do it in a manner na gusto mo. Kasi di ba ganun sa theater? Ang trabaho lang ng director, which is the father, okay? Ang trabaho lang ng director dito is to give instructions kung ano bang expectation. Pero how you do it, how you act it out, how you perform it, bahala ka as an actor. Ganun yung nangyayari sa theatrical model. So, sasabihin lang ni father yung expectation niya, tapos, ang gagawin lang ni mother is mag-guide. So, father tells what he wants. The mother, as stage manager, would now try to guide the children, and the children now would portray their roles. So, bahala sila kung paano nila ipoportray. Just make sure na mako-comply nila at least yung expectation ni father as guided by the mother. Theatrical. It's the most relaxed. By the way, your theatrical model is considered as the most common type of family model for Filipino families. Siya yung pinaka-common sa atin sa Philippines. So, let's talk about your single-parent families. By the way, according to research hindi ako. So, according to researches, single-parent families are very prone to the production of delinquency. I repeat, anong sabi? Single-parent families are very prone to the production of delinquency. Sabi nila, most often than not, pag may single-parent family daw, madalas sila yung nagproproduce ng mga CICL, na mga delinquent children or yung mga youthful offenders ninyo. Ma'am, ano ba kasi ang single-parent family? A single-parent family is a family with only one parent supporting and providing for the family. It is a family whereby there's only one parent supporting and providing for the family. Please take note na hindi porke sinabing single-parent family na agad-agad single mother. No. Possible din na magkaroon ng single father. Ang isipin nyo dito, merong physical absence ng isa doon sa father or mother, kaya isa lang ang sumusustento or iisa lang ang bumubuhay doon sa family. So, pwedeng yung asawa or yung partner na matay, o kaya iniwan sila, o kaya hindi na mahanap, yung mga ganong instances. These are all single-parent families. Now, bakit nga ba ang single-parent families are very prone to the production of juvenile delinquency? Meron daw tatlong reasons. Number 1, economic deprivation. Ang sabi, a single-parent family is financially deprived. Ma'am, bakit? Kasi imagine, you are a single parent. Ibig sabihin, ikaw lang yung magtatrabaho. So, ibig sabihin, because you are the only person working for the family, imbis na dalawa kayo, dahil mag-isa ka lang, lesser yung makukuha mo na money or compensation. Aside from that, okay, being a single parent family, being a single parent, what happens here? You would now try to maneuver or you would now try to find a way na makakapagtrabaho ka without sacrificing the monitoring of your child. So, pipilitin mo ngayon na magtatrabaho ka pero at the same time, babantayan mo pa rin yung mga anak mo. So, because you are too excited to do that, kahit anong trabaho dyan, kahit na low-paying job siya, kakagatin mo. Just to make sure na ma-providean mo yung family mo. Okay? As you do that, nagkakaroon ng economic deprivation. Oo, merong income, pero inadequate siya to support the needs of the family. Okay? Number 2, socialization. So, because you need to work and support your family, merong mga pagkakataon na as you work, you're unable to monitor the company of your children. So, nang possible na mangyari, while you work, dahil hindi mo na ma-monitor yung mga anak mo, there's a high possibility that these children now would be involved in a wrong crowd. Ibig sabihin, mali yung nakakasama ng mga bata. The moment malaman mo, it is already too late. They were already influenced. Or maybe itong mga batang to, nakasalamuhan na yung mga tinatawag nyo na BI or bad influence. That's socialization. Because you cannot really and fully monitor the activities of your child, there's a high possibility that he would be part of the wrong crowd. Tapos number 3, neighborhood. Itong neighborhood na to is very prone doon sa tinatawag nating mga single mother, ang single parent. So pag single mother yung single parent dyan, siya yung very prone dito sa neighborhood na to. Kasi diba, no offense ha, we already know that although liberated na ang Philippines, meron pa rin yung mentality ng mga Pinoy na if you get pregnant out of wedlock, ibig sabihin na buntis ka, tapos hindi ka pa kasal, it's a taboo. So there is a high possibility na itatago mo siya. Para itago mo siya, what do? You would now transfer residence, you would now transfer neighborhood. Para lang hindi ka ma-issue doon sa lugar kung saan ka dati nakatira. So as you now transfer to another locality, magbaback to zero ka eh. New environment, you need to find new work, you need to know different people na hindi mo kilala dati. So kumbaga ba, parang bumalik ka sa pinakababa ng life mo. No one would be there to support you. So ang possibility, you would find it hard to adjust kasama pati yung family mo dun sa adjustment na yun. Okay? Single parent families. So because of these factors, so nang sabi, they are very prone to the production of juvenile delinquents. Ang isipin nyo sa single parent families, ang primary reason daw why they produce juvenile delinquents or CICL is the fact that monitoring of the children is not properly supervised. Hindi mo na ma-monitor yung mga anak mo. Walang proper supervision. Why? Kasi you need to work and attend to them at the same time. So, yan yung single parent families. I'm not saying na it's true in all cases. Yun lang yung sabi ng So, let's talk about the kinds of residences. Pwede siyang matrilocal, patrilocal, bilocal or ambilocal, neolocal, or avunco-local. Unahin natin si patrilocal. If we say patrilocal, the married couple would be living near the husband's parents. I repeat, the married couple would be living near the husband's parents. Ibig sabihin, saan sila titira? Doon lang sa malapit sa residence ng parents ng husband. Pag sinabi naman natin na matrilocal, the married couple would be living near the wife's parents' residence. So, saan sila titira? They would be living near the wife's parents' residence. So, saan sila titira? Doon sa malapit sa parents ng wife. On the other hand, when you say bilocal or ambilocal, the married couple would live near the husband's or maybe the wife's parents' residence. I repeat, pag bilocal or ambilocal, the married couple lives near the husband's or maybe the wife's parents' residence. Ibig sabihin, saan sila titira? Titira sila ngayon doon sa malapit lang sa residence ng parents ng wife or maybe parents ng husband. So either, kahit saan doon, pwede nilang piliin. Yun yung bilocal or ambilocal. On the other hand, pag sinabi naman ninyo na neolocal, the married couple would live separate from both the wife and the husband's parents. I repeat, the married couple would live separate from the husband's and the wife's parents. Ibig sabihin, hindi sila titira malapit sa parents ng husband or sa parents ng wife. They would want to become highly independent. So, ilalayo nila yung residence nila sa residence ng mga magulang nila. That is what you call your neo-local. Yung avunco-local naman, ito yung pinaka-weird. Ma'am, bakit siya weird? Kasi ang mangyayari dito, the married couple would live with the man's mother's eldest brother. I repeat, anong sabi dito? The married couple lives with the man or with the husband's mother's eldest brother. Last na talaga. So, the married couple lives with the husband's mother's eldest brother. Ibig sabihin, sa avunco local, titignan ninyo na yung married couple, saan daw sila titira? Titira sila ngayon kasama nung kuya ng nanay nung husband. So, si husband may nanay siya. Yung nanay ni husband, meron siyang eldest brother, yung pinakamatandang kuya nung nanay niya. Saan sila titira? Yung mag-asawa, titira sila dun sa bahay nung kapatid ng nanay. Short to say, titira sila sa bahay nung uncle on the husband side. That is avunco local. Okay? So, ganito yan ha guys, sa kinds of residences. Kung ako, I'm married. So, kunyari ako, nagpakasal ako. Pag tumira kami malapit sa parents ng husband ko, that's patrilocal. Pag tumira kami malapit sa parents ko, that is matrilocal. Pag tumira kami na pwedeng malapit sa parents ng husband ko or malapit sa parents ko, that is bilocal or ambilocal. Pag sinabi nyo naman na neolocal ang setup, ako at yung husband ko, mag-establish kami ng residence namin in a place na hindi malapit sa husband side ko, hindi rin malapit sa side ko as wife. So that is what you call your neo-local. Ibig sabihin, ang ina-after natin dito is independence of the married couple. On the other hand, pag avunco local naman, yung husband ko may nanay. Yung nanay niya may pinakamatandang kuya. Saan kami titira? Doon sa tirahan ng pinakamatandang kuya ng nanay niya. Short to say, titira kami sa bahay ng uncle niya. That is what you call avunco local. So, let's talk about your marriage. Ang iisipin lang ninyo for your marriage is that it is something that would allow the family members' rights to be well protected. Kasi take note, you could always form a family even without marriage. Yun nga lang, the securities or maybe the protections of the rights of the family members can only be well protected via marriage. Parang ganito. If you cohabit as husband and wife without the benefit of marriage, nagli-live-in kayo. Yung live-in na yan is what you call common law marriage, ha? I repeat, when you say live-in, sa atin sa juvi, how do we call that? Common law marriage. Ibig sabihin, you cohabit as husband and wife without the benefit of marriage. So, ano siya? Live-in. Pag nag-live-in kayo, yes, it's possible that you would be able to have or make a family. Yun nga lang, kung ikaw yung babae, tapos yung ka-live-in mo, chumix ng iba, or nang bababae siya, can you sue that partner of yours for the crime of concubinage? Definitely the answer is no. Tapos anong magiging product ninyo? Sino yung mga magiging children ninyo? They are considered as illegitimate. Oo, may rights sila, kaya lang limited siya. Kaya konti lang yung makukuha nila kasi it's not well protected. Unlike if you are married. Take note, your marriage now would allow you to have your rights well protected under the law. So, better ang protection ng rights ng family members if it is protected by marriage. Okay? Kaya nga, ano ba kasi yung marriage na pinag-uusapan natin? Please do remember that under the family code, marriage is a special contract of permanent union between a man and a woman for purposes of conjugal and family life. I repeat, it is a permanent union. It is a special contract of permanent union between a man and a woman for purposes of a conjugal and family life. Ibig sabihin, dito sa marriage na to, special contract siya. Ma'am, bakit siya special contract? Because unlike other contracts or agreements na madaling i-rescind or maybe madaling i-break, ang marriage, pahirapan para mapawalang visa. Kaya nga, di ba, in the Philippines, they would usually tell you, marriage is comparable to life imprisonment. Why? Kasi pag andyan ka na, nakalak ka na dyan. Kaya nga wedlock eh. So, dyan ka na lang. May possibility or may chance na makalabas ka, pero pahirapan para magawa yun. Okay? Special contract of permanent union. Anong sabi? Between a man and a woman. That is the very reason why ang same-sex marriage sa Philippines, hindi siya maipasa-pasa. Hindi siya ma-approve. Why? Kasi nga, your family code strictly provides that marriage is between a man and a woman. Anong purpose ng marriage? That would be for conjugal and family life. Okay? So, that is your marriage. Now, based on that, meron tayong status of a child. So, the moment a child is born, pwede siyang legitimate, pwede siyang illegitimate, pwede siyang maging legitimated. Let's start with legitimate. When you say legitimate child, this is a person conceived or born under a valid marriage. So, nabuo siya, or maybe pinanganak siya, tapos yung mga magulang niya were legally married. Ano ang status niya? Legitimate. Okay? So, napakapalad ng mga legitimate child kasi full rights ang mga yan. Okay? Kumpletong-kumpleto. On the other hand, pag sinabi naman na illegitimate ka, you are conceived or maybe born out of wedlock. Ibig sabihin, yung mga magulang mo nung nabuo ka o di naman kaya nung pinanganak ka, hindi pa sila kasal. So, possible na yung mother mo pinangakuan ng kasal, tapos hindi naman pinakasalan, o di naman kaya jowa niya dati, tapos nabuntis siya. Yung mga ganong instances, basta ang iisipin nyo, hindi kasal yung mga magulang. Illegitimate child yung product kasi conceived or born out of wedlock. Kaya nga diba, no offense ha, tinatawag silang anak sa labas kasi nga they were born outside a valid marriage. Okay? On the other hand, pag sinabing legitimated, para siyang combination. So, ang iisipin nyo, the person was conceived or born out of wedlock, but whose parents soon married. Ibig sabihin, illegitimate siya dati, pero yung parents niya later on, nag-decide na magpakasal. So, kumbaga ba, nung na-conceive siya, nung pinanganak siya, hindi pa kasal yung mga magulang niya. So, illegitimate siya. And then later on, the parents soon realized na totoo palang true love. So, later on, they decided to get married. So, when they got married, what now happened? Yung bata from illegitimate, naging siyang legitimated. Ang iisipin ninyo, yung rights ng legitimate child is the same with the rights of a legitimated child. We only use the term legitimated to acknowledge the fact na he was originally illegitimate turned legitimate. Kaya siya legitimated. Pero ang rights ng legitimate at legitimated, pareho lang yan. Kaya lang take note ha, for you to become a legitimated child, dapat there is no legal impediment. Okay? Take note ha, there is no legal impediment to marry at the time of conception or maybe birth. I repeat, there was no legal impediment to marry at the time of conception or birth. Ibig sabihin, walang issue kung bakit hindi makapagpakasal yung mga magulang mo nung time at ng conception or maybe birth mo. It means that the only reason why they did not marry is because they were not yet prepared. So, walang legal issues dito, walang legal impediments. Kasi, if at the time of conception or birth, there was a legal impediment to marry, kaya hindi makapagpakasal ang parents mo, even if later on magpakasal sila, you would continue to be an illegitimate child. And the only way to make you legitimate is through adoption. Okay? So, ganun siya ha. Pag legitimated child, dapat at the time of conception or birth, there was no legal impediment to marry. Kasi pag may legal impediment, pag may legal issue kaya hindi sila makapagpakasal, even if they later on married, you would remain illegitimate unless your parents would decide to adopt you. Okay? Parang ganito. If kunyari ako, my parents got married and then I was born, ano ako? Legitimate. If I was born, tapos yung parents ko, they were not married, ano ako? Illegitimate. Pero if kunyari ako, I was conceived or born out of wedlock, so illegitimate ako, di ba? Pero later on, 5 years after, na-realize ng parents ko, ay true love talaga. Nag-decide silang magpakasal. Ano ang status ko? Legitimated. But, if it was discovered na yung parents ko, kaya pala sila hindi makapagpakasal nung time na nabuo ako or maybe nung time na pinanganak ako. Hindi sila makapagpakasal kasi my father was still married to another woman. Okay? If later on, magpakasal yung parents ko dahil kunyari, namatay na yung unang wife ng father ko. Would I become legitimated? The answer is no. Bakit hindi ako magiging legitimated? Kasi at the time of my conception or birth, there was a legal impediment to marry on the part of my parents. Anong legal impediment to marry nila? My father was still married to another woman. Okay? So, yun yung status of a child. Kung titignan nyo dito, pinakakawawa yung illegitimate. Why? Kasi, kunyari, pag inheritance, ang makukuha ng legitimate child, 100%. Yung illegitimate child, half lang ng makukuha ng legitimate child. Actually, under the civil code, totaling wala siyang makukuha. Nagkaroon lang siya ng makukuha because of the family code. Pero it's only 50% of what the legitimate child would be receiving. Kaya nga diba, an adopted child has more rights than an illegitimate child. Why? Because an adopted child is always a legitimate child for all purposes of his civil rights. Okay? So, yun lang siya, status of a child. So, yun na siya. Yun na yung family natin, yun na yung marriage natin. By the way, ang isipin nyo lang ha, in relation to delinquency, okay, refresh lang natin. Single-parent families are prone to the production of CICL or juvenile delinquents. Aside from that, ang isipin ninyo, parental attachment. A high parental attachment would produce what? Lesser chances of delinquency. So if parental attachment is high, the connection of the child with his family is high, chances of delinquency would be low. Tapos last point that you have to remember is, parental rejection is the most common reason for delinquency. Parental rejection is the most common reason for delinquency. Ibig sabihin, if the child does not feel that he belongs, if the child does not feel that his family loves him, or maybe that his family cares for him, ano ang possibility? This child now would become delinquent. Okay? Yun siya. Family in relation to delinquency. Okay? So ngayon, next topic na tayo, let's talk about abuse. Dun sa definition of terms, we talked about neglect, di ba? Neglect is inaction or lack of action. Anong counterpart niya? You have here the word abuse. Abuse is too much action or excessive action. I repeat, abuse is too much action or excessive action. Now, pag abuse ang pinag-uusapan natin, meron siyang different kinds. Pwede siyang physical, pwede siyang sexual, pwede siyang psychological. Ang isipin lang ninyo, whenever we talk about your physical abuse, this would now pertain to the infliction of bodily harm. I repeat, you have the infliction of bodily harm. Most often than not, pag merong physical abuse, the most common symptom would be the existence of physical injuries. Okay, may makikita kang wounds, or maybe contusions, hematoma, yung mga ganun. Okay? Physical abuse. Pag sinabi nyo naman na psychological abuse, at times you call it your emotional abuse. This would now pertain to the infliction of psychological trauma to the person or psychological violence to the person. Ma'am, how do we do it? You now do a psychological abuse by targeting the emotions of the person. The violence you inflict now affects the person emotionally. Example, you now have the utterance of profane language. Ibig sabihin, minumura mo siya. Anak ng tutut, putang tutut, or whatsoever. Okay? So, utterance of profane language. O di naman kaya, you're going to humiliate the person. Or maybe, you would now try to belittle the person. Psychological abuse yung mga yan. Lastly, you have what you call your sexual abuse. When you say sexual abuse, ang iisipin nyo lang dito, it could be physical, it could be psychological. Kaya lang natin siya sineparate kasi ang sexual abuse ninyo would always entail lewd designs. Laging merong kasamang libog. Okay? So, pag sexual abuse yan, there are always lewd designs. Ibig sabihin, merong libog. Okay? That would be your sexual abuse. These are the kinds of abuses. Siyempre, kung merong abuse, may gumagawa. How do you call the person doing it? You call them abusers. There are different kinds or typologies of abusers. The first is what you call your parentally incompetent abuser. When you say parentally incompetent abuser, this is an abuser who abuses the same way he or she was abused. I repeat, this is an abuser who abuses the same way he or she was abused. Ibig sabihin, in this context, the abused becomes the abuser. So, kung paano siya inabuso nung bata siya, pag tumanda siya, he would do or he would copy the same abuse. Kaya nga, kung titignan ninyo, if a parentally incompetent abuser was a criminal, anong type ng criminal siya? You call him a copycat. Dahil copycat siya, what type of crime is being performed? What classification? You call the crime committed or the act committed as a crime by imitation. Kasi what do? You merely copy, you merely imitate what was done to you. Okay? So, parentally incompetent abuser, equivalent niya na criminal, copycat. What type of crime? Crime by imitation. Ang question, what theory supports it? Take note, the theory supporting it is your social psychological theory. Anong sabi? Crime is learned through imitation. Okay? So, kunyari lang. Kunyari, nung bata ako, pag may nagagawa akong mali, isinisabit ako ng parents ko patiwarik. Kunyari lang. Okay? My parents don't do that, pero kunyari lang. Isasabit nila ako patiwarik, tas gagawin nila akong punching bag. That's why, nung ako na yung tumanda, and then I now had my own child, whenever my child commits a wrong, I would also discipline my child the same way I was disciplined. Yun nga lang kasi in this case, the discipline was in the form of an abuse. Okay? So, kung anong nasuffer ko noon na abuse, yun din yung gagawin ko doon sa magiging victim ko or doon sa magiging offsprings ko. Okay? Parentally incompetent abuser. Next, you have a mentally disordered abuser. Ang isipin nyo lang dito, this is an abuser who abuses because of a mental defect. I repeat, a mentally disordered abuser is a person who abuses because of a mental defect. Always remember that a person suffering from a mental disorder usually loses contact with reality. So, hindi talaga niya alam kung anong nangyayari. Kaya ang possibility, he would be doing things that he himself does not understand. Kasi, di ba sabi nga sa inyo, pag may mental disorder, lalo pag insanity yan or whatsoever, possible na may hallucination, illusions, or maybe delusions. Ibig sabihin, wala siyang full control dun sa ginagawa niya kasi he does not see reality as what it really is. Okay? Parang ganito. Perfect example natin dito are women suffering from postpartum psychosis. When you say postpartum psychosis, sinong nagsasuffer nito? Yung mga mothers who gave birth, no? Hindi naman kailangan na as in kakapanganak lang, no? Possible na tumagal ang postpartum psychosis ng years. So now, there was this case in US whereby the mother was suffering from postpartum psychosis. Na-diagnose na yun ng doctor pero the doctor still allowed the mother to go home. Ngayon, wala pang 24 hours yung mother na nakauwi. Ano nga yung nangyari? Nagkaroon na ng report na meron daw incident dun sa bahay nung mother na nagsasuffer ng postpartum psychosis. What happened there? Itong mother na to, she actually stabbed her newborn child 72 times all over the body. Tapos nung tinanong siya kung bakit niya daw ginawa yun, kasi daw, yung anak niya, kampon daw ng demonyo. Okay? Question. Kampon ba talaga ng demonyo yung anak niya? No. Nagkaroon ba ng abuse? Yes. Bakit niya nagawa yun? Because she was suffering from a mental defect. Ano siya? Mentally disordered abuser. Next, we have a situational abuser. This is a person who abuses when confronted by a situation. I repeat. This is a person who abuses when confronted by a situation. Ibig sabihin, may nangyari. At dahil doon sa nangyari, yung emotions mo because of that occurrence or that incident, yung emotions mo doon, ibinaling mo ngayon doon sa victim mo. So, kunyari, ako, I went to work and then sabi ng boss ko, sisante ka na. Siyempre, I would feel so down. Ngayon, umuwi ako. Upon arrival, I now saw my child. Nang sabi ng anak ko, Mommy, let's play. Kaya lang, because I was not feeling good dahil nga na-terminate ako sa job ko, sabi ko, anak, later. Mommy's not feeling well. Pero syempre, bata, ang kulit niya, Mommy, let's play. Please, let's play, sabi niya. Eh syempre ako, mainit na nga yung ulo ko because of the termination dun sa office namin. May init yung ulo ko because of that situation. Tas ang kulit pa nung anak ko. So now what happened? Yung frustration ko dun sa termination ko from my work, ibabaling ko siya dun sa anak ko. Okay? So, papaluin ko yung anak ko, sasaktan ko yung anak ko. Question, bakit ko nagawa yun? Because I was confronted with the situation. I was terminated from my work. And all my frustrations in said termination was now projected to my child. Okay? Diba? Kung maalala nyo, defense mechanism. Anong gagawin mo? Sa projection, ibabaling mo yung galit mo sa ibang tao. Okay? That is your situational abuser. Next, you have an accidental abuser. Ang accidental abuser abuses because of wrong judgment. I repeat, accidental abuser abuses because of wrong judgment. Or better, poor judgment. Wrong or poor judgment. So, parang ganito. So, one day, my son went out. Kunyari yung anak ko, lumabas siya. Tapos noon, paglabas niya, wala pang mga 1 hour, yung kapitbahay kong chismosa, knock. Anong sabi niya? Mare, alam mo ba, nakita ko yung anak mo, nagyoyosi. Yun yung sabi niya. Siyempre, nagalit ako agad. Tapos nung pinauwi ko yung anak ko. Ngayon, hindi ko pa natatanong yung anak ko what really happened. I already started na saktan siya. I already started na paluin siya. Okay? Question. Did I ask him what really happened? The answer is no. So, ang judgment ko, totoo yung sinasabi ng kapitbahay, kaya at that, I now started spanking my child. Yun pala, unknown to me, yung anak ko pala hindi nagyoyosi. Nagkataon lang na yung kasama niya, nagtali ng shoelace, tapos yung kasama niya, pinahawak sa kanya yung yosi, kaya yung nakita siya ng kapitbahay ko, hawak niya yung yosi. Tapos akala nung kapitbahay ko, nagyoyosi yung anak ko. Okay? Now, was there poor judgment? Yes. Kasi if only I asked my child what really happened, most probably nakapag-decide ako ng tama on what should be done. Okay? Accidental abuser. Abuses because of poor judgment. Next, you have here, subcultural abuser. Ang isipin nyo lang sa subcultural abuser, the end, justifies the means. So, the end justifies the means. Ibig sabihin, for a subcultural abuser, the person abuses and justifies said abuse. I-repeat, anong sabi dito? The abuser abuses and justifies said abuse. Ibig sabihin, alam niya na abusive siya, pero binibigyan niya ng justification. Parang ganito. Diba, sasaktan ka, and then later on, sasabihin sa'yo, anak, pasensya ka na, pero ginagawa ko to for you to change for the better. Na kaya kita kinurot, kaya kita sinaktan, kasi gusto kong lumaki kang okay. Yung mga ganun ba na sinasabi ng parents? Okay? They know that they are abusive, pero they justify the abuse that they are doing. Subcultural abuser. And of course, lastly, you have what you call a self-identified abuser. Ang iisipin nyo lang, a self-identified abuser abuses because he cannot control himself. I repeat, he abuses because he cannot control himself. He knows that he's abusive, he is afraid that the abuse would be discovered, kaya lang, even if he knows it, even if he is afraid, he cannot really control himself. Kumbaga, kung criminal to, criminaloid siya. Diba? A criminaloid commits a crime because of lack of self-control. Ganun din si self-identified abuser. Why does this person abuse? Kasi nga, he lacks self-control. Yung kumbaga ba, takot siyang malaman na abusive siya. Alam niyang abusive siya, pero he cannot really stop himself from abusing. Okay? So, yun lang siya, yung mga types of abusers. Possible na yung abuse natin or violence would be having a cycle. So, meron tayong cycles of violence. O yan, you have your episodic cycle and you have your generational cycle. Unahin natin si episodic cycle of violence. Always remember that in this cycle, violence or abuse occurs between the same parties in a repeated manner. I repeat, violence or abuse occurs between the same parties in a repeated manner. Ibig sabihin, same people ang involved. Tapos what happens, yung violence or yung abuse paulit-ulit na lang. Okay? Ang perfect example natin dito is yung sa vowsy nyo under RA 9262. Diba sa RA 9262, pre-provide doon yung tinatawag natin na cycles of violence. Yung cycle of violence doon is an episodic cycle of violence. So, nang sabi, meron daw stages na dadaanan yung tinatawag nating cycles of violence. So, ano yung una? Number 1, meron tayong tinatawag na tension building stage. Ano ang sabi sa tension building stage? This is the stage where the conflict starts. I repeat, tension building stage is the stage where the conflict starts. Dito nag-uumpisa yung conflict. In this stage, nagkakaroon tayo ng slight physical injuries and verbal abuse. I repeat, meron tayong slight physical injuries or maybe verbal abuse. So, dito nagkakaroon ng conflict, tas mumurahin ka, and then sasaktan ka, pero hindi pa siya ganun kalala. Now, as a woman, ayaw mong lumala yung situation. So, instead of fighting back, hahayaan mo lang siya na murahin ka. Hindi ka lalaban. Hahayaan mo lang na itulak ka, na sabunutan ka. Hindi ka papatol kasi you do not want to worsen it. In the mind of the woman, sabi ng 9262 ninyo, in her mind, she's not fighting back kasi she does not want things to worsen. But on the part of the man, iisipin niya, ay kaya hindi to pumapalag kasi totoo lahat ng sinasabi ko. So, hinahayaan lang ng babae. Ito namang lalaki, go lang ng go. So, because of that, from the tension building stage, pupunta tayo sa next stage. Nagkakaroon tayo ng acute battering stage. If you talk about the acute battering stage, this is your abuse proper. Why call it abuse proper? Kasi andirito yung peak ng tension, andirito yung peak ng violence or abuse. In here, you would now be able to see severe or maybe serious physical injuries. So, severe na yung injuries, meron ka nang makikita dyan na mga imprint or latay ng serious physical injuries. Ito yung stage na halos mapatay na yung babae during the violence. Okay? That is your acute battering stage. Now, after nun, pupunta tayo sa third stage. You now have what you call your honeymoon stage or your tranquil stage. Why call it tranquil? Why call it honeymoon stage? Kasi, during this stage, itong abuser mo would be asking for forgiveness. He would be repenting. Sasabihin niya, I cannot live without you. Han, hindi ko sinasadya. Han, hindi ko ulitin. Han, hindi ko kayang mabuhay nang wala ka. Yung mga ganun. Okay? Ikaw naman si Gaga, naniwala ka naman. Ikaw naman si Gaga, dahil feeling mo wala nang ibang pwedeng magmahal sa'yo kagaya ng hinayupak na yan, umuo ka, okay na, forgiven na siya. So after that stage, everything goes back to normal. Parang walang nangyari. Hindi mo mamamalayan, you go back to tension building. Tapos, babalik ka ng acute battering, pupunta ka ng tension building, routine na siya, paulit-ulit na lang. Anong tawag nyo dyan? Episodic cycle of violence. By the way, just to remind you, under RA 9262, na babalikan ninyo pag andun na kayo sa law subjects ninyo, kailangan i-undergo ninyo yung cycle more than once. If you say more than once, ibig sabihin, yung 3 stages na yun, kailangan daanin mo for at least 2 times. Kasi more than once, ibig sabihin, minimum of 2 times. Pag nadaanan mo na yon, pwede ka na mag-claim ng battered woman syndrome. Pag binugbog ka, yes, you're a battered woman. Diba? Pero for you to claim the battered woman syndrome as a justifying circumstance provided by RA 9262, kailangan daanan mo yung cycle more than once, meaning minimum of 2 times. Okay? So, episodic cycle ha, same parties, violence over and over again. Episodic cycle. Next, we have what you call your generational cycle of violence. Ang iisipin ninyo dito, it is otherwise known as your intergenerational transmission of violence. I repeat, anong tawag? Intergenerational transmission of violence. Ibig sabihin, violence is passed from one generation to the next generation. As if, I'm not saying it is inherited, pero as if it is inherited. Kasi from one generation, the violence is passed to the next generation, then passed to the next generation. Parang minamana mo lang siya. You do not have the same parties here na paulit-ulit. What you have here is one generation passing the violence to the next generation, going to the next generation. So, ano yung example natin dyan? You go back to your parentally incompetent abuser. Diba si parentally incompetent abuser, he would abuse the same way he was abused. So, parents niya, inabuso siya. Tumanda siya, nagkaroon siya ng anak, aabusuhin niya rin. Yung anak niya, pag tumanda, nagkaanak, aabusuhin niya rin. Okay? Or possible din, na it is a general cycle of violence in the sense na, kunyari ako, kunyari lang, I hear my mom belittle my dad. So, naririnig ko yung nanay ko na minumura niya yung tatay ko, o kaya verbally ina-abuse niya yung tatay ko, naririnig ko yun. Ako ba yung na-abuse? Not necessarily. It was my dad, di ba? Pero, ang iisipin ko doon as my mom's daughter, ay okay lang pala to, ay it's normal. Kaya, if I grow up, at akong nagkaroon ng asawa, anong gagawin ko? Gagawin ko rin yung pagbebelital ng nanay ko sa tatay ko, gagawin ko rin yun sa husband ko. Okay? So still, generational cycle yan. Violence is passed from one generation to the next generation. So it is possible na ikaw mismo yung abused or possible din na you were a mere observer. Tapos, ginaya mo lang. Okay? Generational cycle of violence, otherwise known as your intergenerational transmission of violence. Next. Let's talk about your adolescence. Ang iisipin lang ninyo whenever we talk about adolescence is, it is your transition from childhood to adulthood. Or better, it is your transition from childhood to maturity. Yun yung tinatawag natin na adolescence. Now, kailan ka ba kasi considered na adolescent? Depende yan on what view you are using. There are several views for us to determine if you are already in adolescence. So, marami tayong views na ginagamit to determine andun ka na ba sa transition stage ng childhood mo tsaka ng maturity mo or ng childhood mo at tsaka ng adulthood mo. Kailan ba kasi merong adolescence? Sabi ko nga, depende yan kung anong view, di ba? So, pwedeng biological, psychological, sociocultural, or maybe historical view. Para madali nyo siyang maalala, ang biological view would tell you na yung puberty or adolescence is the stage whereby a person would be having bodily changes. I repeat, pag biological view, there is puberty, there is adolescence if the person now would be undergoing biological changes. Example, magiging prominent yung Adam's apple mo, o di naman kaya you would be growing your pubic hair, lalapad yung shoulders mo, kaya lalapad yung hips mo, yung mga ganun. Okay, biological view yan. Meron daw adolescence, why? Kasi you are now having bodily changes. Nagmamature na daw yung katawan mo. So, there's adolescence. Pero, pag sinabi ninyo na psychological view, anong sabi? Adolescence is the turbulent period of life caused by the biological changes producing changes in emotions. I repeat. Sa psychological view, anong sabi? Adolescence is the turbulent period of life. Okay? Caused by the biological changes producing what? Emotional changes. Ang sabi ng psychological view, oo, merong bodily changes. Pero merong adolescence dahil yung bodily changes na yan nagpo-produce ng changes ng emotions. So sabi, because of the dramatic changes in the body, nagkakaroon din daw ng dramatic changes in emotions. Yun daw yung psychological view. Pag biological, ang focus lang body changes. Pag psychological view, anong focus? Changes in emotion because of the changes in the body. On the other hand, pag sinabi nyo naman na socio-cultural view, anong sabi? Adolescence would be dependent on the culture of the society where you belong. Adolescence would be dependent on the culture of the society where you belong. Parang ganito. In other countries, meron tayong tinatawag na FGM. You have what you call your female genitalia mutilation. What happens here? In that certain country, there is a so-called society with a specific culture believing na you are only considered as an adolescent if you are able to undergo a successful female genitalia mutilation. Ibig sabihin for them, kahit na reglahin ka dyan, hindi ka pa adolescent. Adolescent ka lang daw if, anong nangyari? Na-scrape na nila at natahi nila yung clitoris mo. Okay? That is female genitalia mutilation. O di naman kaya for some countries, at times, the Philippines, di ba? Adolescent ka lang daw pag tuli ka na. Pag hindi ka pa daw tuli, pag supot ka pa daw, itong sabi, ay, hindi pa siya adolescent. Socio-cultural ang mga yan. Okay? Next. We have what you call historical view. Under historical view, anong sabi? Adolescence varies from one period to another, depending on the existing circumstances. I repeat. Adolescence varies from one period to another, depending on the existing circumstances. Ibig sabihin, time to time. Kaya siya historical. Diba? Sa history, ang basis natin is time. Ang adolescence basis nila before, iba sa sumunod na generation, iba sa generation natin, depende daw kung anong period of time ka nabuhay. Kasi yun ang magiging basis mo on how you view adolescence. Okay? Historical view. Pagkatawan, biological. Emotions, psychological. Pag-culture, socio-cultural. Pag-time, pag-period, historical. Okay? So, ganun lang siya. Next. A gang is a group of people aimed at illegal activities. I repeat, a gang is a group of people aimed at illegal activities. Ibig sabihin, yung gangs ninyo, organized siya or devoted siya sa tinatawag nating illegal activities. You cannot call yourself a gang if what you do is legal. Pag yung grupo mo, ang primary purpose niya is to commit a wrongdoing or maybe to do something illegal, that's the only time that we call you a gang. Okay? So, wag kang aginraraman dyan na gangster ako, parang ewan. Okay? Ang presumption, pag gang member ka, if you belong to a gang, ang activities ninyo are always considered as illegal. Okay? Now, meron tayong characteristics ng gangs. Organization, leadership, turf, cohesiveness, tapos purpose. Pag sinabi nating organization, dahil gang yan, you now have a group of people with a common goal. Ano ang common goal ng gang? It is always to commit illegal activities. So this, ang gangs ninyo would be a group of people, right? Tapos ang goal nila would be, their common goal is to do illegal activities. Now, yung organization na yan, yung gang na yan, would not be able to function properly without leadership. Ibig sabihin, they need someone who would be in charge of the administration of the gang. Hindi pwedeng lahat sila members. Hindi pwedeng lahat sila leaders. Meron at merong isa. The leader chosen by the gang is usually the alpha. You call him the alpha kasi is the most superior among the members. So, pwedeng physically capable tapos mentally capable siya. So, siya yung pinaka-superior mentally speaking or maybe physically speaking. Depende sa gang kung ano ba yung prefer nila. Ano ba ang alpha sa kanila. Next, you have their turf. Pag sinabi nating turf, turf is the territory or the place where a gang operates. It is the place or the territory where a gang operates. Etong turf na to is the common reason for gang wars or gang fights. Kasi, the larger the turf, the stronger the gang. Yun ang presumption natin. Next, you now have cohesiveness. Pag sinabi natin cohesiveness, your gang members are very well bonded. They are very close with each other. Kaya nga, itong gangs ninyo, meron silang tinatawag na defensive worldview. Under the defensive worldview, ano ang sabi nila? No one could be trusted except ourselves. So, ano ang sabi nila? All people who are non-members, all people who are outsiders cannot be trusted. The only people that you could trust are your fellow gang members. Kasi, sino bang family mo? Yung gang members mo. Kaya nga for them, mas matimbang ang relation nila with their gang members compared with their relation with their respective families. Okay? Cohesiveness. Just remember your defensive worldview. So, if you are a non-member, you cannot be trusted. You can only trust your fellow gang members. That is your cohesiveness. And of course, you now have purpose. Siyempre, dahil gang yan, their purpose now is what? Their purpose is to commit illegal activities. So, meron tayong different kinds of delinquent gangs. So, pwede siyang criminal gang, conflict or violent gang, or maybe a recidivist gang. Pag sinabi natin na criminal gang, always remember that they develop in stable, lower-class neighborhoods. I repeat, they develop in stable, lower-class neighborhoods. Ibig sabihin, we now expect na this kind of delinquent gang originates or comes from a poor neighborhood. Pero at least, kahit galing sila sa poor neighborhood, you now expect na stable yung neighborhood nila. Kumbaga ba, if they were living in a slum area, their slum area is organized. Okay? So what type of slum area do they belong or do they live? They live in an organized slum area. Pag sinabi natin organized slum area, yes, mahihirap sila, but hindi ganun kagulo doon sa neighborhood nila. Ang iisipin ninyo, in a criminal gang, meron tayong tinatawag na adult role model. So the members of the criminal gang have a high regard to the adults in their neighborhood. Ibig sabihin, they now see the adults in their neighborhood as people who should be followed. Models ang tingin nila dun sa mga adults doon. So because of that, in a criminal gang, nagkakaroon tayo ng integration of age levels. Ibig sabihin, ang criminal gang, merong mga bata, merong mga matatanda. Yung mga bata, pag tumanda sila, they still belong to the gang. Tapos, yung next generation ng mga batang yan, matututo doon sa mga batang tumanda na members ng gang. Ito mga batang to, pag tumanda sila, here now comes the next generation. Pag tumanda na yung mga batang yan, sila ngayon ang magtuturo doon sa next generation. Okay? Ganyan sa criminal gangs ninyo. So, because of this arrangement, ang iisipin nyo, yung young members ng criminal gang are under the control of adult criminals. Under the control of adult members of the gang. Ganun yung criminal gang ninyo. So, yung mga adult na criminals ninyo, sila yung role model, sila yung nagko-control, sila yung nagtuturo dun sa members ng gangs ninyo. Okay? So, ganun yung tinatawag na criminal gang. On the other hand, pag sinabi nyo naman na conflict or violent gang, similar siya sa criminal gang, yun nga lang, they develop in disorganized slum areas. Ma'am, bakit siya kinonsider na disorganized? Kasi magulo. Ma'am, bakit siya magulo? Kasi you now have moving in, moving out, moving in, moving out of different people. Ibig sabihin, there is a continuous change in the population, kaya yung social at saka cultural aspects ng community na yon run into conflict. Kaya siya conflict or violent gang. Imagine, you belong in a disorganized slum area. Yung mga tao doon, in and out, kaya hindi stable yung culture. Hindi stable ngayon yung norms nila. Papalit-palit kasi papalit-palit din ng tao. Ang conflict or violent gangs ninyo are very common in cities. Example, sa Metro Manila, maraming disorganized slums doon. Ma'am, bakit in and out yung mga tao, papalit-palit yung mga tao. Kaya papalit-palit din yung culture at saka yung norms. Yung mga gang na nade-develop sa mga ganyang places are considered as conflict or violent gangs. Ito yung medyo mahirap i-control. Why? Kasi nga, they really do not have a specific norm. Papalit-palit sila, kaya they are hard to control. Lastly, meron tayong tinatawag na retritivist gang. Pag sinabi natin na retritivist gang, ang iisipin lang ninyo dito, this type of gang is unsuccessful in both legitimate and illegitimate means. Kaya siya retritivist. Negative. Hindi nila kayang i-attain yung legal or yung legitimate na needs. At the same time, hindi rin nila kaya yung illegitimate needs. So, anong nangyayari? They now become double failures. Negative eh. Ito yung mga tao na wala ng pag-asa, kaya susuko na lang sila. So, because of this, they now retreat to what you call sex, drugs, or maybe alcohol. More of vices yung nangyayari dito sa retritivist gang ninyo. Parang for example, the person is poor. He wants to study, right? Pero kailangan niya ng pera. Ngayon, dahil nga mahirap lang sila, wala siyang pera. So, hindi niya kayang ma-attain yung gusto niya through legitimate means. Now, trinay niyang gumawa ng crime, pero hindi rin siya good na kriminal. Hindi siya magaling na kriminal, so wala rin siyang napala. So, hindi niya kaya ng legal. Hindi niya kaya ng illegal. Feeling niya, he is already hopeless. So, what would he do? He would just give up. He's a double failure. Legitimate, illegitimate, hindi kaya, he's a double failure. So, anong mangyayari? Instead of doing something in his life, doon na lang siya sa sex, sa drugs, sa alcohol. More of vices siya. Okay? Not really violent crimes, but rather more of crimes related to vices. Okay? So, yun lang siya. That would be your retritivist gang. So, next, you have what you call your levels of delinquency. Street offense, other serious offenses, minor offenses, or maybe non-offending. Ang iisipin ninyo dito, street offenses would be violent crimes committed on the streets. Okay? Parang funny siya, pero yan talaga siya. So these are violent crimes committed on the streets. Perfect example. Pag nagkaroon ng gang fight tapos doon nagbugbugan sila on the streets, violent crime yun eh. So anong tawag natin dyan? Street offense. Pag other serious offenses naman, these are violent crimes committed in other places. I repeat, these are violent crimes committed in other places. Example, home invasion. So, kunyari yung gang ko, one night, pupunta kami dun sa isang bahay, papasukin namin, bubugbugin namin lahat ng nakatira doon, o kaya papatayin namin, basta magvavandal kami dun sa place. Okay? Was there a violent crime committed? The answer is yes. Nangyari ba siya sa street? No, kaya hindi siya street offense. Saan siya nangyari? It happened in another place and it is violent. So ano siya? Other serious offenses. Next, you have here minor offenses. Pag minor offenses yan, these are offenses that would usually involve status offenses and public nuisance. I repeat, pag minor offenses, ano ang damay dyan? You have here status offenses or maybe public nuisance. You already know what are status offenses, diba? So, walang problem dyan. Dito tayo sa public nuisance. When you say public nuisance, this would now pertain to anything that would cause irritation to the public. Kahit anong ginagawa mo na nagkakos ng irritation sa public is considered as public nuisance. Example, itong mga gang members na to, lagi silang nakatambay sa kalsada, nakahamba lang sila doon, though hindi sila nanggugulo, yung mere presence nila already irritates the public. So ano siya? Minor offense in the form of public nuisance. O di naman kaya, naglalagay sila dyan ng mga graffiti, it irritates the public. Ano siya? Minor offense. Lastly, non-offending. I really do not know kung bakit sa books natin sinama to as a level of delinquency. Ang iisipin nyo lang, pag non-offending yan, it would be any activity of a gang whereby other people don't really care. So, gawin man nila yan or hindi, walang pakialam yung mga tao. Okay? So, ganun lang siya. Levels of delinquency, street offense, other serious offenses, minor offenses, tapos you have here your non-offending. Dito tayo sa causes of adolescent drug use. Ma'am, why do we need to tackle it? Kasi, one of the most common problems of adolescents nowadays would be drug use. Ang tanong, why would these adolescents use drugs? Ano ba yung reasons behind it? So, merong 4, okay, na findings yung mga researches natin. Number 1, weakening of social control. Ibig sabihin, bakit daw gumamit ng drugs yung adolescent? Kasi nga, the family maybe or the society can no longer control the behavior of the person. Ma'am, bakit hindi na makontrol? Kasi nga, this child grew up like this. Hindi siya nasweto nung mas bata siya, kaya he's already like this. Pasaway na siya. So, because of that, hindi na siya makontrol ng community, kaya wala na ring magawa yung community or maybe wala nang magawa yung family niya in order for him to stop. Kasi di ba ganun usually? If a person gets curious, he would try drugs. Now, anong problem dito? Even if the parents or the family wants to stop this child, they cannot really control their child. Okay? Weakening of social control. Next, double failure. Alam na natin to eh. Negative, negative, diba? Ang iisipin lang ninyo, itong double failure natin is what you call retreatist, dun sa modes of adaptation, doon sa inaral ninyo na anomie theory. Dun sa theories, right? You have anomie theory, you have their modes of adaptation. So, pwede siyang conformity, innovation, rebellion, retreatist, yung mga ganun. Possible siya, right? Ang double failure ninyo falls under retreatist. Ma'am, bakit ganun? Kasi, for your double failure, the child now feels that he has nothing to do in his life. He believes that he cannot attain the legitimate means. He cannot attain the legitimate goal because he cannot attain the legitimate means. So, he would now try the illegitimate means pero wala pa rin. Wala pa rin nangyayari. Palpak pa rin siya. So, legal man or illegal yung gagawin niya, palpak pa rin siya. So, because of that, he would just what? He would just make suko na lang, and at the end of the day, magre-resort na lang siya sa drug use. Feeling niya, patapon na yung buhay ko, ito na lang pwede kong gawin. Number 3, socialization into drug use by the subculture. Always remember that subculture refers to gang. Subculture, ano yan? That's your gang. So, what happens here? If you are a gang member, if you want to stay in that gang, you need to follow what the gang asks you to do. Kung ano ang sabi ng gang, you need to comply if you want to retain your membership. So, ang nangyayari dito, if the gang members would be using drugs, what's the expectation? You, as a member, should also use drugs. So, bakit ka daw nagda-drugs? Kasi nga, ito yung ginagawa ng gang. So, I need to go with the flow. Lastly, you now have oppression and family conflict. If the child feels rejected, or maybe the child feels burdened dahil sa mga problems niya in the family, ang possible way para maka-escape siya dun sa problems na yon would be via drug use. Dito pumapasok yung sinasabi nila na kahit sandali lang makalimutan ko man lamang yung problems ko. So what do? They now use drugs. Okay? So, yun yung 4 na causes ng adolescent drug use. Let's talk about female delinquency. According to research, most often than not, majority of delinquents would be males. Okay? Karamihan daw ng mga delinquent, mga male. Pero, it does not necessarily mean na lalaki lang ang gumagawa ng delinquency. There are also cases of female delinquency. Yun nga lang, mas konti daw yung number ng mga female delinquents natin compared doon sa mga male delinquents. So, mas konti daw yung tinatawag natin na female delinquents compared doon sa tinatawag natin na male delinquents. Now, kung i-compare daw natin yung female delinquents natin with male delinquents, ang isipin nyo, usually daw, ang female delinquents would be committing less serious crimes. Okay? I'm not saying at all times, ha? Pero most often than not, they commit less serious crimes. And at times, ano ang sabi? They commit sexually motivated crimes. So most often than not, crimes committed by females, yung mga female delinquents natin, they would be committing less serious crimes o di naman kaya mga sexually motivated crimes. Okay? Kaya ano yung papasok dyan? Andiyan dyan yung mga larceny ninyo, running away, simple assault, disorderly conduct, drug abuse violations, yung mga ganun. Okay? Basta less serious siya or maybe sexually motivated. Ganun daw yung female delinquency natin. Kaya nga, whenever a crime happens, no offense naman sa mga lalaki, ang lagi nilang iniisip ay baka lalaki na naman to. Kasi, rarely would people think na babae yung nagko-commit ng delinquency. Okay? So, yun lang iisipin nyo ha. Pag female delinquency, ano ang sabi? Usually, less serious siya or maybe they are sexually motivated. Ngayon, let's talk about female delinquency in relation to your gangs. Traditionally, ang gangs ninyo would be composed of all male members. They do not accept female members. Kaya nga traditionally, kung meron mang female na gang member, ang presumption, she belongs to an all-female gang. Kasi all-male gangs do not allow female membership traditionally. Kaya lang, as time passed by, nagkaroon tayo ng mga mixed gangs. You call it a mixed gang. Why? Kasi nga, you now have a membership composed of both men and women. Kaya siya mixed gang. Kasi gang siya na ang members, babae at saka lalaki. Kaya lang take note, very strict ang rule nila in order to allow a female to join an all-male gang. Kasi all-male dati eh. Tapos biglang you would allow a female to join. So meron silang standards or qualifications na tinitignan before they could accept you as a gang member. Ito. Ang isipin nyo, chances of a female being a member of an all-male gang would be dependent on the following. Okay? Number 1. Higher chances if the female is pretty. So, pag maganda yung female, higher ang chances na i-accept siya sa gang. Or maybe number 2, the female is dating one of the core members of the gang. So, yung una, she is pretty, or if not, this female is already dating one of the core members. So, dahil ang dinedate niya is an important member of the gang or maybe one of the founders of the gang, inaalaw siya ngayon na maging member. Or maybe, number 3, the female is considered as a co-equal by male members. I repeat, the female is considered as a co-equal by the male members. Ibig sabihin, ang tingin ng mga members ng gang na yon, etong babaeng to, co-equal nila, kapareho lang nila. So, kumbaga ba, parang lalaki din ang treatment nila dito sa female na to, although we know that she is a female. Okay? So, that is what you call the standards for you to have high chances of joining a gang. Now, in case you are already a member of that gang, so nagkaroon na tayo ng mixed gang, right? Ano ngayon ang gamit mo? What would be your use in the so-called gang? If you are a female member, most often than not, these are your roles or functions as a member. Number 1, you now have a weapon carrier. So as a female member of an all-male gang, they would use you as a weapon carrier. Ma'am, why? Kasi take note, usually in bars, sino ang bantay nila dyan? Sino ang bouncer nila? You now have a male. So gender sensitivity tayo, right? Even if you are a bouncer, as long as you are a male, you are not allowed to frisk a female. Hindi mo siya pwedeng i-frisk. Hindi mo siya pwedeng i-body search. Why? Gender sensitivity. So, anong gagawin nung gang? They would now allow the female to carry the weapon kasi they know that the chances of this female being searched by the bouncer is very low. Or maybe number 2, they use the female as a distraction. Ibig sabihin, the female is being used to divert attention. Take note, if the female is pretty, she can easily get the attention of other people, thus diverting their attention. Okay? So, yun lang siya. That would be your female delinquency.